And welcome to the Factor Uncensored, another historic day on Capitol Hill, but not for a very good reason. House Republicans are now in the middle of the longest speaker contest since 164 years ago. Now, Kevin McCarthy has been on the ballot, but a majority of Republicans have rejected him more times than an ugly date on a prom night. That's 11 hell no's to him in the last few days. Many now wondering if he could ever be elected and how much longer this will continue. Dr. Dietrich von Biedenfeld from the University of Houston downtown and Dallas Jones, political analysts, are both here to hash it out. Dallas, what the hell is going on? My God in heaven, man.
Well, I mean, what's going on is a hijacking of democracy is what's happening. I mean, I think as this plays out more and more, people don't realize the real effects that this is having on the federal government. One, there's not a third person in the presidential line of succession. You have members of Congress that are not able to conduct important national security business because they're actually not sworn in members of Congress. As this plays out, people will not be able to get paid because committees will not have, chairs. And so this is all about, one person's ego, frankly, in my opinion, because as you've stated, there have been 11 hell no's. The question is, how many more within his own party is he going to have before he realizes that the speakership is about the American people in the people's house?
Now, we've heard from political reporters that former President Donald Trump has been making calls saying, let's move forward, vote for this guy. But these are his people, many of his supporters, who will not vote for McCarthy. Why?
He's actually the biggest loser in this whole battle. And the fact that he has endorsed McCarthy, it further solidifies that the Republican Party understands that they're going to have to move away from Trumpism if they want to be able to really govern and ultimately take back the White House. And so many blame him within his own party for being the cause of what should have been a Republican bloodbath actually being a trickle. And so, what they're saying is that, and now funny enough, in the 11th vote, Donald Trump actually got one vote.
We heard that. Donald Trump from Florida.
Right. But at the end of the day, it's a huge indictment on him and the sway that he believes that he still has in the Republican Party. This is a living example that we're watching, that it is not what it was.
So, Dr. von Biedenfeld, has former President Donald Trump lost control of many of his supporters? You had one member of Congress, she said, I love my favorite president, Donald Trump, but I'm not voting for Kevin McCarthy.
He's lost control, but he never had control. Remember when he mentioned getting vaccine boosters? He was booed. So in the idea that when you peddle in vitriol and the crowd turns on you, as soon as you lose control of that, this is like a narco drama, right? So once the capo shows to bleed, then everybody piles in, right? They toss him in the alligator pit. And so a lot of these folks are in their small districts with their close people at 2-year terms, and they need to keep the theater up. This is, electrolytes are what plants crave. So we've got to keep up the theater. And, throwing out a black member of Congress and then claiming that it's racist, that your tokenism is not being accepted by another party that you don't speak to, you malign at every opportunity. It's sort of comical, except for the disastrous point that my colleague said. We can't govern. We can't swear in members of Congress. We can't establish committees. We can't argue about budgets.
And for the average viewer at home, what does that mean, we can't govern? How does that affect them? What's the trickle-down effect for the average person in Houston that may be watching this and like, I don't give a about it?
Well, you've got those 3 A's in this process. So whether you have authorization doesn't mean you have the appropriation. And those aspects of the budgetary process, just because you have a $1.7 trillion bill, doesn't mean that when FEMA comes back for clarification about which families qualify, or that single mom says, can I get these benefits? And some agency in the executive branch goes to Congress and says, can I get clarification on this? Oh, sorry, we can't give you clarification on this. So that money then doesn't go out into those communities as efficiently as possible. So while you think governs best, governs least, which I would agree with generally, would work in this case, it actually costs us more money through the lack of time and oversight.
Now, what we heard from former House Speaker Majority Nancy Pelosi was, this is embarrassing. What are the Democrats sitting back thinking about this? Obviously, the popcorn eating is over. Now it's serious business because the people's work is not being done.
Well, look, from a political perspective, the Democrats are looking at this going, see, we told you that they weren't ready to govern. We told you that they have an identity crisis going on. Now, from an idea of actually wanting to get this government up and running, look, this is a constitutional crisis. You have to, there are 3 branches of government in this country. One of them is not functioning. This is a major problem for the beacon of what democracy should be for the world. And so the Democrats, this is, you know, there is talk, although far-fetched, of the idea of forming a coalition government in order to elect a speaker that would be moderate. While the Democrats have stood strong.
How likely is that?
Not very likely at all, but when it enters the conversation,
right,
it means that both sides are realizing we've got a real problem here. Now, easily 5 people could deflect to Hakeem Jeffries, but I don't think that they want to necessarily take their slim majority and hand it over just completely to a Democratic speaker.
And does Hakeem cause that inflammatory area that we saw 164 years ago? Because what did 1855 and 1857 lead to? I think there was something that happened in the 1860s.
A Civil War?
Oh, I heard of that.
So what's the next step here if they cannot come to a consensus, Dr. von Biedenfeld?
Well, unfortunately, they have to, and they will. The reality is, though, we're going to reach these impasses and see an escalation of the hyperpartisanship. You're going to see people doubling down. While Marjorie Taylor Greene may have defected from the Berberts and the Gates of the area, you're still going to have to do this. So it's going to happen in the 44th vote, the 133rd vote. It's going to happen. The challenge is the longer we take with this, just like when we talked about COVID aid, the longer it takes, the more reconstruction you have to do.
The trouble is that when asked how long would he go, McCarthy said, until he wins.
And that's kind of embarrassing.
Absolutely.
When you are the heir apparent and no one wants to crown you king.
He's moved in the offices.
That's what he's moved in the office.
What if he has to move his ass out?
Apparently his whips can't count too well.
All right, Dallas Jones, Dr. von Biedenfeld, thank you for joining us here on The Factor.